When I was very small, when I was very young actually, I was sitting in our living room at home and with my sister, and a car bomb exploded outside the window. And we were catapulted to the other side of the room. And in that moment, I kind of experienced this sense of silence inside of an explosion. Like the room exploded, there were shards of glass everywhere, and miraculously we survived. And inside an explosion, there's kind of like a place where time and space stops, and you go into a gap. And in that gap, there is a real pure sense of stillness. And from that moment on, that memory was imprinted in my psyche. And I have been making work at the edge of landscapes and volcanic terrains ever since, trying to understand the internal workings of volcanoes and earthquakes and what happens inside of an explosion. And it's been really, really remarkable journey for me, because I've been working in the School of Biology and Environmental Science in University College Dublin. And working with scientists who are at the cutting edge of their practices, working with really remarkable materials and inventions, And that has led me on an amazing journey, which I'm going to tell you about now. So this piece refers to an expedition that the Franklins went on in 1845. It was an incredible expedition, and they were going to a part of the world where nobody had navigated before. It's called the Northwest Passage, and they were going to enter into this gap, which I felt was more or less like the gap that I'd gone into in the silence, in this explosion that I'd been into, because I became extremely interested in this expedition. And there was 2 ships that set off in 1845. They had all the best scientists at the time, and they were going to go right to the very gap, just at the borderline of where the gap was in the Northwest Passage. And on the ships were they had tin food that had never been invented before. They had photographic plates that had never been used before in the world. And these guys were going to do something nobody had ever done before. And I was so interested in this expedition because their photographic plates got lost in some of the glaciers, and they were discovered many years later. And on those photographic plates were the records of the time that these guys had spent, some of the explorations that went in search of them, and they found the markings and the shadows and some of the fossils of the time and the people who'd lost their lives on these glaciers, which I thought was incredibly sad and a narrative that I wanted to explore. So I went in search of this expedition, went on an expedition myself, and I went to the Arctic in 2015. And I wanted to explore this narrative, but more than anything, I wanted to use this as a platform to look at what's happening in our climate right now. We've entered into a new era in climate change. I'm sure you've all heard about it, but it's called the Anthropocene. And it's a remarkable era because we have literally pushed our climate into another epoch. The impact that we've had is so extreme on the terrain that we are now in a new time, and geologists have called it the Anthropocene. I was really, really touched by this idea with the scientists that I'm working with, that we have now, in 50 years, we've managed to undo 15 million years of evolution, which is remarkable, really. So when I was there, I started to record everything I could find. I was recording the sounds of the glaciers melting. I was photographing everything. My camera broke down, so I had an iPhone 5. And I took this footage and I made this film. It's called At the Edge of Visibility. And I'm going to play a clip of it now. And I'm going to talk over it. But I went on a ship very similar to what the Franklins had gone on to, a barkentine tall ship. And this was my ship, but it was identical to theirs. So this narrative was following me everywhere I went. And I felt so sad for these people who'd really perished on the glaciers. And so I was recording the glaciers that are melting, the disappearing world that's up there, and the whole sense of the diminishing of the ecosystems. And I was really taken by, the presence of glaciers, because I had a lot of time to spend up there, and I spent a lot of time sitting in front of glaciers and just experiencing, you know, the magnitude and the majesty of them, these massive archives of history that contain the primordial waters of our earliest people and our earliest times. And when you're sitting there, there's this incredible crackling sound all the time. It's like these bubbles are bursting. And when you sit down and listen to it, well, I did. I sat down and really tuned in and slowed down. And I realized that, you know, I was listening with a different perception. You're not listening with your ears. I started to kind of feel their pulse because they're emitting pulses. And when they crackle and the pulses release into the atmosphere, they're actually releasing the earliest atmospheres of prehistory, you know, of time. So I was really taken by that, and it reminded me of my earliest experience of being in the explosion, of slowing down and hearing this sort of pulse, because you're listening with a different perception. And I wanted to take the sound piece and to put it somewhere where it would be preserved. You know, I wanted, because the Arctic is melting, and in 20 years' time, that topography is going to be completely gone. And I wanted to take this record that I'd made and to put it somewhere in the world where it would travel forever and it could go on into future galaxies. So the plan is that next year I'm going to work with the European Space Agency, and it will be beamed into space. The material that the Solar Orbiter is, Solar Orbiter, by the way, is a spaceship that's going to the sun, and it's going to go to a place we've never been before. It's going to photograph the sun at unprecedented close-up levels to look at climate change. And Solar Orbiter is being beamed next year with my sound piece, and it's been covered by a material that's made from charred bone and carbon, which is an extremely interesting material because, of course, it's what has caused the glaciers to melt. Carbon has. And there's an Irish company called Bio that have revolutionized this material, and they invited me to work with them, and I made this series of sculptures. And these pieces are about honouring and sort of, they're a poetic response to the glaciers and what I'd seen up there in this ice that was breaking and calving all over the place. And I used the material and I heated it up in various ways to make it crack and to make it sort of, you know, expose the fragile earth underneath it, and to give this sense of the fragility that I'd seen in a lot of the broken off pieces of ice. And each one of these sculptures relates to a year that's gone by since the Industrial Revolution, which is, of course, when most people think climate change started. The paintings that go with this work refer to the photographic plates that I'd seen that came out of the cameras that were in the glaciers. And I use a lot of oil paint, and I use geological processes where I try to scrape back and remove layers to go back in and kind of reveal, you know, the marks underneath and what I'd seen of these ghostly shadows of this disappearing place. Again, I use compression and a lot of heat treatments in my paintings to try and give the sense of things that are underneath and, you know, like fossils in time. This project is extremely interesting because I've been working with a professor in University College Dublin called Professor Jenny McElwin. And she has been doing this project to do with plants, because the plants, of course, represent the you know, the air that we breathe, and they're the one thing that are going to obviously save the world, hopefully, because through the pores of plants, that's where we get our air from. So this project was very interesting because I reenacted atmospheres that go back to 400 million years with this project, and I created a series of images relating to the earliest plants that were collected around the world. And I used a 400 million year old atmosphere to create the images as a way to show history of time and how our atmosphere has come into where it is today. And this piece happened by natural occurrences. It's called Silent Witnessing, and I found it very close to my studio. And when it was being discarded, it was a very large tapestry in which butterflies had been pinned to the surface. And when I unpinned the butterflies, I realized that a natural photogram had been created through time. It took 100 years for this to make, and it was an archive nobody ever meant to make, where the butterflies had literally imprinted themselves onto the paper through the melanin of their wings, and dust, and time, and light. In a way, it was like this message about listening to the world, because in the most, you know, unobvious places, we find the most amazing secrets and sort of messages about impermanence and who we are as a species. And I'm going to end with this piece because it's called Solar Skin, and it relates to, the circular shape relates to our sun and our moon, and it is the beginning and the end. I've related this piece to a lot of the messages I'm trying to say in the work, in that by looking into the past, into our records, into ancient time, that's how we can project ourselves into the future. And because Solar Orbiter is going to the sun next year to go to photograph our sun at tiny levels, I wanted to use the skin of an animal in order to give a reference to the idea of the skin of the earth and what climate change is exposing. It was extremely hard to make this piece. I worked with a guy called John Gillis from Trinity College. He's a head conservator. He worked on the Book of Kells and a lot of our ancient manuscripts, and he taught me how to use this material because it's got anatomical memory, which means it moves all over the place. And the the veins of the animal relate to the journey of its life and the pores, because it's a living, breathing thing, it's skin. And the monastic scribes had used these materials around 600 AD in Ireland, and they recorded our earliest weather patterns in Ireland on this material, and I wanted to use it as a way of thinking of how to kind of expose what climate change has done to our Earth. So it relates, there's a black drawing around the edge, which is a seismogram, which relates to the exact moment when we changed the signal in the Earth from our last climate into the Anthropocene. So I'd like to say that I think that we're all part of a very long, deep time geological era, and we're all, as humans and plants and animals, we're all part of this kind of timeline together. And my work has been about the act of listening to the earth, and I think it's trying to talk to us, and it's a living system in which we all play a part, and I think it's got an incredible adaptability. So thank you very much.